Let me tell you what happened to me. No, give me a moment. I was in Long Beach, California. My cousin Josh. No, I'm not gonna say his last name. He works for Toyota. It's like New York City Zoo. He calls me up when I get an audition. I've already got accepted on the Jim Carrey film on the Majestic, and I already got into Drake Dormis's play House Divided, and I was in rehearsals. Calls me on the phone and says, "Hey, we're gonna all go out to a bar in Long Beach." This is my cousin, blonde-haired cousin. We got in a fight when we were almost like toddlers. I pulled his hair and he scratched my face. We were playing Dukes of Hazzard. He was a skater and I was a skater and all this stuff. He went off to Toyota and made some money and married this Korean. And she'll do whatever he says. I mean, maybe not now, but she'll do whatever he says. So he calls me and he's like, "Hey, come down to this bar in Long Beach." I said, "No, I'm in rehearsals. I really would like to, but I'm swamped." I end up going to those rehearsals to Drake Dormis. Drake Dormis is a famous Hollywood director that worked with AFI. He was the youngest director. I helped him get into AFI. He was the youngest director ever to get into AFI at 17 years old. I played Donovan in his student film, a character name. Also played the same character, or a similar character, Donovan, in the play House Divided, which was done in Orange County. There's record of it. Part of that, about to work shoulder to shoulder with Jim Carrey. All of a sudden, I'm driving back from acting class from Hollywood. I get this phone call on my cell phone. I just got a cell phone, one of those flips. They're not flips, but the slider cell phones. Hi, and it basically what happened was I went to the Backstage magazine to work for a telemarketing company out of Los Angeles. They've been doing it for a long time. They're probably still doing it or something similar. It was a community-based thing called the Police and Sheriff Support Fund, which they had albums. When I went for the interview, there were albums stacked to the ceiling. He was printing out albums for the community. He would take card space or ad space and put it in the album, just like you do in high school when you sell albums. Or you can sell photo albums or annuals, just like an annual. It's basically like an annual. He probably got the idea from high school. So sure, I'll do it. He goes, "Listen, you'll be my branch out in Long Beach. You just call people, ask them, tell them you work for the Police and Sheriff Support Fund. Here's a script. Give them a call, telemarketing. Do it on your free time. Do not take cash." He said, "Do not take cash, because if you take cash, you have to have one of these cards." And he showed it to me. It was some kind of license and stuff. So I'm driving back from acting class. And I get this call. "I want to place your ad space in your annual." I said, "Well, yeah, one stipulation, you have to pay by check. A check is like a contract." He goes, "Okay, well, I think he said something like, can we talk options or something?" I don't know what he really said. Sounded like some kind of dumb guy or whatever. He was a bartender. It was total entrapment. Don't know if it was connected with Josh or not. I told him, I said, "Oh, well, let me get to it." It took a while. It took like a week. He left a bunch of messages. I found this funeral parlor. They said, "Listen, we can do the ad space for the Police and Sheriff Support Fund. We'll just send you a check in the mail. That's perfectly legal." I said, "Yeah, just make it out to my name. I'll run it by my manager." And it was like a $200 thing where they do ad space. I was going to show him the check and get it approved. He said I could do that if I wanted to. The funeral parlor mailed the check to me, which I never got to. All of a sudden, I get this phone call again, and the same guy bugging me. "Come down to the acapella." They've closed this bar now. California's in a lot of trouble. It's a lot of trash. Brad Pitt goes out there, eats at McDonald's, arriving, all that stuff. No, the guy starved, worked with a bunch of strippers. But really, what happened was I said, "Listen, I'll meet you at the Acapulco Lounge, whatever." And I was come back from rehearsal. This was way out of my way. I had the information written down on what the space would be, the size of the space. Went to the Acapulco Lounge. When I was driving by, I heard someone say, "Get out of here, go back to Texas," or something like that. I don't know who it was, but I heard them say that. I drove around and I parked. I got out. I walked over to the Acapulco Lounge. I went in. I said, "Is the bartender here?" He came around from the bar. So after I gave him the money. It was like $500 thing, an ad. I said, "Listen, I cannot take cash. I can only take check. Is there any way we can negotiate a check? He said, all I have is cash. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll run the cash by the bank, turn it into a personal cashier's check, and take it to my manager. He said, fine. So I grabbed the cash. I walked out. That was actually a check because he made an oral agreement saying that it was a check. So that cop should do some time. When I walked out, they had a guard dog, all the whole thing. They got me. It's a $200 fine, misdemeanor. I had to have my mom fly out, all this stuff. They handcuffed me, interrogated me for like 3, maybe 4 or 5 hours to one table. Left me in this room, no water or anything. I was handcuffed to this table. This guy finally pulls me out of jail. I spent 17 hours in jail total. Guy pulls me out of jail, and he says to me, he's a British guy. He goes, okay, one more thing though. Before that guy did that, when they had me interrogated, the guy sat down and looked at me in the face. He knew, he goes, what did you come to California for? Because they had my license and everything. I said, I came here to be an actor. He said, well, let me ask you something. How did you like my acting job? I said, well, let me tell you what acting is. I said, there's a guy named Grotowski, Jerzy Grotowski from Poland, and he defined acting pretty well. He said, it's prepared work from a willing audience, from an audience that's willing to watch. You have me handcuffed here in this table. You think I'm willing to watch you? He had his face like right in mine. Well, he left, and then the good cop came in and he said, this is what we're going to have you do, blah, blah. He said, I want you to draw where this office is. So I drew where the office is. Then this British guy had come in to lie. They pulled me out of jail. They knew they were all in trouble. And he pulled me out, and I walked up to him, and he like pulled me out of jail. He said, Kyle, I want to talk to you. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a wire on you and have you go back to this office that was raided a few years ago for this very same thing. I said, oh, what, I guess whatever, So my goal was to get back to that office and get one of those annuals to make sure I had proof to show to the judge, which I did. I went back to my leather jacket. It was all 21 Jump Street. Well, anyway, that actual one cop that said that came out of nowhere. He had a British accent. He was like some from undercover thing. What ended up happening is I went back. The guy was still printing annuals. He was still signing up people to do the thing. The thing was perfectly legit. There were people in there signing up to do this annual thing. Annuals were still being printed. He was still handing them out. I got one of the annuals. Said, listen, I got to show it to a client. Went back, showed it to the judge. It was a misdemeanor, $200 fine. And then I had to do 28 days of basically picking up trash along Long Beach highways. And then right after that, during doing all that, I got on set with Jim Carrey. I worked shoulder to shoulder with Jim Carrey. I got on set with Dustin Hoffman and Jake Gyllenhaal in Moonlight Mile, which is at the time it was called Babies in Black. Check your facts on that. They called the movie Babies in Black when it was actually Moonlight Mile with Jake Gyllenhaal, one of his first movies. He was very arrogant when he was on set too, but he was young. And Dustin Hoffman was there helping him. I messed up a little bit, but I did go in front of the camera and do all the stuff they needed me to do, okay, as a background artist. After doing that, I did the X-Files. I was on a little segment of the X-Files, 3 words. I helped out Drake Dormus with a student film. It was called The Bum. I played Donovan. The Bum was played by one of his community theater, Orange County crazy guys. He got into AFI, or he was on his way to get into AFI. It's him and Ben York, who they made the first movie that was ever on Facebook, known as Beauty Inside. They've also done several films. They're working on Aurora, or they're about to do Aurora soon. I flew to New York to go to the actor studio because I got accepted. During doing all this, I met the girlfriend of Sam Kinniston. We rehearsed Desire on the Elms, and I would, so I guess this is all so I could do better. I did the hoe stuff with the rake hoe, chopping ice plants along Long Beach while I memorized lines. Diane Salinger worked with me. She was a coach. She was Simone on Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure. She worked with me and told me, hey, just carry your lines with you while you work on the side of the road or whatever. So I had to do the 28 days. I had to eat protein bars pretty much, because I was pretty thin. I was about 150 pounds or 147, 150. Finally, during all of this, I met a professor at one of the colleges out there who was this lady that helped me through some stuff, gave me some hints about New York City. She was originally from New Jersey. Her name's Alexis. She was a professor into literature. She knew I was writing screenplays because I was writing a screenplay that had a comedy that had Marlon Brando in it called, had 2 different names. One was Catch and Marlon, and another name that I was using for it was called Oscillate Wildly, which I do want to use Stephen Patrick Morrissey for if you ever want to do a comedy. It's Spike Jones kind of comedy. Basically, what ended up happening is I finally said goodbye to Alexis. We had an affair for a couple months, whatever. I flew to New York. She mailed my computer to me, but not my code. So I had to go through some stuff to get established there, to look like at least I was trying. And my grandmother sent me my grandfather's railroad coat when I was in New York. The reason why, this is my second audition for the Actor Studio, and I got into the Actor Studio Drama School. And Lipton saw me at the Actor Studio West, and we did Desire on the Elms, me and Sam Kinnison's girlfriend, and it was pretty good. He said he liked it. He said he wanted me to spend 3 years, dedicated in my life 3 years to get my MFA at the Actor Studio Drama School. At the time, I hadn't even heard of Bradley Cooper. So when I got there, I enrolled, and I got at NYU to look for a room. I first met with an actress, an off-Broadway actress named Kara Anderson, also known as Vetter. And I got to NYU, and someone touched me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, listen, are you looking for a place? I got a place out in Brooklyn." So I went out to Brooklyn for 2 weeks. I didn't lose everything, but someone got a hold of important documents of mine, basically my ID, all my cards and everything. I had to call my bank and close accounts and everything because I accidentally set my wallet on a cashier's counter. Someone took off with it. I ran out for those kids. I asked them, I said, "Hey, listen, just leave the IDs. You can have the money that's inside, everything else. Just leave my ID," because I wanted to be able to check in to the new school, in the Actor Studio Drama School. They said, "Look, man, we don't steal," or whatever. So I don't know if the clerk got it or what. The clerk gave me money. He gave me like $20 or something like that. So it could have been the clerk, maybe. But anyway, I grabbed these nectarines because he gave me money so I could buy something to eat because I was hungry. And I got back to my apartment in Brooklyn. A few weeks later, finally I get a call from the new school. They had a dorm for me between Broadway and Park. I moved into this dorm on the 3rd floor, that's where I began to study with a guy named Chris from the Navy, another guy that was Peter, who's from Amsterdam, and a guy named David, who was a lighting designer for the new school. They all went to the new school. Chris was Actor Studio too, but he was very, very heavy into Alexander, which is a technique. Finally, I got started, and I started memorizing, started doing scene work. Didn't have a television. One day I wake up late, around 10 o'clock, it's September 11th, 2001, and the whole thing went down. I moved past that. They closed school that day. Everyone had to recover. Those that decided to stay, stayed. Those that didn't, I stayed until summer. Then I had an incident, a problem with a washing machine, where this lady popped off at me and hurt my feelings, and I thought that she had thrown some lipstick in my clothing in the washing machine. I thought she'd purposely damaged my clothing. So I poured a little paint in the washing machine. Lipton called me in, suspended me. I went back to Euless. That's pretty much it. We did all type of scene work. I had a chance to meet Al Pacino one time. Didn't get a chance, but he was working on one of his best roles that he ever did, which is Salome. And he was rehearsing that time at the Actor Studio, doing rehearsals in the Actor Studio. I got to meet Ellen Bernstein and Estelle Parsons, and I got to see there, watching, observing below me, because I was up above where Anthony Hopkins sat. Bob Lavelle had me kind of going there. I would observe there. Bob Lavelle's passed away. Anthony Hopkins hasn't, but it was up in the balcony looking down. Over there, and when I looked down one time in the middle of class, when Ellen Bernstein was talking and everything, there was Billy Zane. He was sitting there with a scarf on, just sitting there, full attention. Don't think he said a word. He turned around and smiled and everything. Never knew that he looked like Marlon Brando. He's doing Waltz and Marlon right now. He was there. He was in class. So you got to realize the program is split in two. You have the Actor Studio, which is by Birdland, which is basically like Hell's Kitchen. You have the Actor Studio, which is basically Birdland. You have the school, the MFA program, which is the New School University at that time. Bradley had already graduated. I auditioned a year before, right when Bradley was a senior. So he had been doing Wet Hot Summer, getting ready to go when I'd be coming in as a freshman or my first year. It's a 3-year program. So I missed him by 1 year. But the Alexander teacher would talk about him all the time, and the Elephant Man, because it was his thesis. She helped him tweak the Elephant Man with Alexander. Teva. So there was a friend, Alok and Modi, and we knew that we were in, New York City. Bob one time gave us free tickets to go see The Glory of Living, which was directed by Philip Seymour Hoffman. And I also got to see Tape at the time before Richard Linklater turned it into a movie. Ethan Hawke was not on off-Broadway. This was like a theater house similar to MCC, the Manhattan Class Club, which is where Philip Seymour Hoffman was directing. This other one was a similar theater that they did Tape. There were unknowner actors. It was really good production, stage combat. We focused a lot on not only stage combat, but like a lot of sense memory, a lot of things like script analyzation, or at least analyzing scripts from a point of view of maybe kind of like a director, but from a point of view of understanding where maybe the playwright was coming from. We were encouraged to read as many plays as possible. We were encouraged by Bob Lavelle to constantly read all the time, as much as we could. Not really to write. What was I doing? I was reading. I was checking books out of Bulps, which is NYU, but I was writing too. I was writing a novel that was called Trapped in Three. It was originally called Trapped. It's a long story about a journalist that gets trapped in his car, but anyway, and it also had to do with him being an actor and being in New York. I just had to do it. I had to write, because when I start reading these writers, I just want to copy them. So we were reading as much literature as possible. I hung out with mostly the playwrights. So I wanted really to kind of get as much playwriting information as I could. I knew a lot about sense memory and emotional recall, knew a lot about all that. It wasn't anything that I was hearing for the first time. But we did explore Meisner techniques and things like that. Bob went through a whole thing with Stella Adler too, and teaching from Stella Adler's book. It was mostly Stella Adler. It was also Meisner, and it was also referring to Strasberg's sense memory. We did work with lemons to recall the taste of lemon. We did recall emotional moments. There was one thing that worked for me, which was imaginary monologue, which is where you picture the face of someone you know and you begin to talk to them like you would a ghost. And you begin speaking to them as if they're in the room and they're not even there. You imagine them. He walked us through that in a very powerful way. Bob passed away. So he died. I found out about it from a playwright, because I hung out with a lot of the playwrights. And he died. And the playwright that I hung out with was the one that So Go the Ghost of Mexico, which he brought through Dallas at the Underground. I hung out with him. So he wrote a kind of a Brechtian play about kind of like drug activity. It was kind of about these ghosts that are run off the road. I think he did somewhere in the article it mentioned cartel. His father worked for police department, or works for the police department, LAPD. Anyway, I met him because he passed through with his play. He passed through the Undermain, which is off at Deep Ellum, and he had a whole cast and stuff like that. He told me that Bob had passed away. So anyway, I only got through 1 year. One of my good friends that was there, Larry Levy, he died the second year. Don't know if it was 9/11 related. Don't know if he got close to 9/11 or whatever happened. With me and 9/11 is I did walk to it. Chris said, "Are you going to brave it and go?" And I said, "Yeah." Chris was my roommate, and I walked up to it. But I was approached by a Talk magazine reporter. It was a lady that ran Talk magazine. I think it was the lady that ran it. She said, "Well, what are you doing down here?" And I said, "Well, I'm checking it out. I go to the New School University." And I had like this journal I was writing. She said, "You need to get back. We just got information that it's actually not structurally sound, that these buildings could possibly fall." They didn't think the buildings were going to fall. And I moved back. She saved my life, probably. So I experienced it in a close way. And then I saw it from outside where I was living, and I saw it on television. We also weren't allowed to do things that day, like use our card. There was weird things that happened. And then we were very aware of airplanes and stuff, because airplanes were flying over and hitting in the building. It was more than one airplane. It was two. So we were very aware. And then there was the Pentagon that was hitting all that stuff. So it affected us. When I got back, I realized that we were probably most likely going to go to war. And I decided to just write as much as I could, read as much as I could, kind of follow the plan that Bob wanted me to. I did publish a screenplay in the Library of Congress under my name called Lost Awaits, Stranger Goodbye. That's published in the Library of Congress. I made sure that got published. I did poetry because I didn't know how much time we had as a country. I didn't know how much time we had as people, because you saw the end of the world right in front of you. Everyone saw it on TV. I smelled it. So A friend of mine that I talked to in the village, she said one of her kids saw it. She saw the plane. A child saw the plane hit the building. Not a lot of people saw the actual plane hit the building. I think it was a handful of people. Not a lot of people saw it. I didn't, but I did see the buildings on fire. That's all I'll say. Did I see the buildings fall? No, but I did see them on fire. I was probably indoors when the buildings fell. I will say this, I did see the smoke afterwards, and it did billow up, and it did lean over the city like a tall man leaning over. I compared it when I first saw it, destruction, as a glass man, because so much glass had been shattered. Later, it turned into a smoke man, like an old man leaning over the entire city and then falling into almost Central Park, covered the entire city, all the smoke billowing all the way over, covering everybody, all the streets of New York, all the way from Battery Park, all the way almost to Central Park, covered. So you'd walk out into a cloud. I called my dad from that cloud, from Painford, and I told my dad, I said to my dad, I said this, I said, Dad, what do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to nuke? Meaning, are we going to nuke over there? Because we found out that it was related to bin Laden. And he said, probably. He said, we'll probably nuke them. I said, do you think that's the right thing? Because they're protesting. They were protesting in the park not to nuke them. So there was a whole crowd that said, don't nuke them. And then a crowd say, let's just nuke them. There was debate. A lot of people wanted the nukes. And then a lot of people didn't. They actually had signs saying nuke them. There were people from the Middle East that were pulled out of gas stations and beaten to death on the streets. There were also people selling old t-shirts of the Twin Towers. So people profited off of it, and people killed because of it, and people left the city. So that's why the bin Ladens were flown out for their own safety. They would have been killed. New York wanted blood that day because they lost children, women, old ladies. They lost handicapped people. They lost people that couldn't hear, people that couldn't see. They lost, like I said, all types of families were killed, all in an instant. And they wanted someone to pay for it. Now, when you experience that and you feel it on the street, it's different than watching it on TV.